We all have shame. It's like the thing that makes us feel most alone and isolated, and it is one of the most common experiences as a human. It both feels isolating and has the potential to be connecting.
Mental health, emotional health, physical health, deeper understanding, actionable takeaways to improve your quality of life. We're the Level Up guys.
Even guys can have emotionally literate conversations, and we're the guys that are going to prove it.
What's up, you guys? We are back. Today's a big one. It's a heavy one. Probably this is going to be multiple episodes, so make sure you're following us on YouTube, Spotify, all the places you get your stuff. We're talking about guilt and shame. Now, I'm not an expert in the topic. I'm a yoga teacher and a Pilates teacher. However, I spent enough time in rooms with broken people, including myself, to have a little bit of an understanding of these things. Thankfully, we have Jarrett, who's an expert. This is his career, his profession. He's a mental health counselor, family man, best friend, all the good stuff. So we're talking about shame and guilt. Jarrett, where do we start? It feels like shame might be, it almost feels like it comes from external sources, whereas guilt might be coming from the inside. And if that is true, can that shame be defeating, where guilt can kind of be like a compass to change one's behavior or level up or better up? What say you?
Yeah, well, so first, that was like the best intro you've ever given me, I think. So thank you for that. Um, and yeah, so I do see guilt as a compass, and I like how you make the connection to um, how shame can be something that is maybe externally driven, and guilt is maybe kind of internally. And so while shame might be more limiting, guilt could actually be inspiring in a way, right? And when you said compass, that makes me think like a compass that points at what, right? And when I think about that, it leads me to a compass that guilt is a compass that points us back to our values, right? So, for example, guilt, if we're defining it, I really like Dr. Becky Kennedy's definition here. So she says it's the uncomfortable feeling of recognition that we've acted out of alignment with our values, right? So when guilt shows up, that is a cue that we've acted out of alignment with our values. And typically that feeling points us back in the direction of how we can realign. Does that make sense for guilt?
100%, yeah. So would it be fair to say that shame would be something like I'm bad, I'm a bad person, where guilt might be something like I did a bad thing? And then through that recognition, through that, you can improve your own behavior by, I wasn't my best self. I kind of fumbled the moment. I wasn't, the best version of myself that I could have been. And by recognizing that, that'll give you a nice foothold to try to do a little bit better the next time.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And where guilt is, I'm a good person who did something regrettable. Shame is, I'm a bad person, right? And I mean, the tricky thing there is that, like, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but if have you ever or know anybody who has not let themselves off the hook for something, right? Like who essentially is unwilling to forgive themselves or to see themselves as a potentially good person who did something regrettable or hurt somebody's feelings or whatever, in the hopes of motivating themselves to have better behavior. Do you know kind of what I'm talking about when I say that?
Yeah, I'm curious to know, is that seems like shame.
Yeah, I would say so, right? Like, and it
Let me
certainly,
ask you this. Let me
yeah,
interject.
yeah.
Is shame more attached to like your feeling of yourself and your identity, where guilt might be attached like to a behavior?
Exactly. That's exactly right. You're a pro already. Episode
Look at
over. Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And I know you're a big Brene Brown fan, and as am I. And she says a lot about the differentiation between the two. And but yes, and so I think you're spot on to identify, oh yeah, when people would kind of tell themselves that they're a bad person and not let themselves off the hook, um, with that kind of stickiness, right? That is certainly guilt that turns into shame, if not just straight up shame. But the tricky part about it, the really tricky part about it, is that it's just a logical thing. We acknowledge that bad people engage in bad behavior, right? And so if we're truly accepting ourselves or believing in our identity as a bad person, we're actually going to be more permissive of bad behavior with the belief that we're a bad person than with the belief that we are a good person who sometimes does regrettable things and who has the capacity to return to their good personness when we choose, which then creates the energy and momentum to actually change, as opposed to essentially letting ourselves off the hook with, a blind spot of thinking that we are keeping ourselves on the hook.
Yeah, yeah. When you first suggested we do an episode on guilt and shame, the first thing I thought about was this scene in Game of Thrones. You know
Mm,
Game of Thrones?
of course.
Yeah, where whatever the blonde woman who ended up being the queen, she was so evil.
Cersei's or something?
Cersei, yeah, yeah, yeah. So there was one point where she was on the outs. So they made her strip down all of her clothes and she walked through the town and everybody
Mm-hmm.
threw rotten food at her, at rotten food, and they were chanting shame, shame,
Shame, shame.
shame.
Yeah,
Right. So it makes me really think and be aware of how shame has been used kind of as a tool, maybe in religion, maybe by our parents, maybe in schools, to be able to kind of to get us to do a certain thing. We
yeah,
talked a lot in our podcast about how we want to be part of the tribe. We're communal animals. We want to be part of the group. The
yeah,
last thing we want to be is ostracized from the group, right?
yeah,
So maybe we kind of assimilate into the group think and get away from our individualism to be
yeah,
able to make sure they don't feel the shame. But I see that same scene is played out every day on social media. If
for
you
sure.
believe in a certain thing in a certain way, partially because you don't have to look at another human being in the eye, you're kind
Yeah,
of shamed for a certain thing.
yeah.
And I've seen a lot of instances where people are shared to really share their opinion or their voice for
Mm-hmm.
that fear of, even a few years ago when you were at the height of cancel culture, like you could say one wrong thing 15 years ago and it was that shame,
Yeah.
and you were kind of ostracized for the group. I want to know more about like religion, parenting, teachers. Like that's a tool that's been
Yeah.
used.
Yeah, and right, it's society in general, right? So, and I think what you're talking about is, in some ways, weaponized shame. Like if you're considering a tool to be or a weapon to be a tool, right? It is in some way. It is something that serves a function, right? And so that is when shame is weaponized to try to either control behavior or how people think or feel or present, right? Or yeah, yeah. I mean, really, it's about control, right? That is when, and I guess particularly when it is, um, as you mentioned at the beginning, coming from an outside source, right? Even with subtle messaging, though, that's the really hard thing is that, um, you know, any type of propaganda, no matter what side it comes from or what country or whatever, um, has these subtle messages and use of language that implies shame and starts to shape beliefs with enough conditioning. Because as we've mentioned before, we're mammals and animals, and we therefore respond to conditioning. Um, you know, the interesting thing is, going back to the tribe part, is that natural shame, not the weaponized kind, but natural shame it was kind of this internal mechanism when we're much younger, um, to keep us part of the tribe. One of the things about the human species is that we survived and evolved the most out of any other species that we're aware of, not because we're the fastest or the strongest, but because of our capacity to work together, right? And so when healthy, our bodies and brains are programmed to reward us for social behaviors, or pro-social behaviors, and to make us truly like intensely uncomfortable in our bodies for behaviors that might result in abandonment or rejection or exile from the tribe, right? And so the function of shame and guilt was, in its most natural state, was to motivate pro-social behavior in order to remain part of the tribe. Yeah.
Hmm. I wonder if that naturally evolved into, say, religion, where you could believe in sin and judgments on that sin, right? There's an element of that there too. Excuse me, we're doing so good, I'm getting all choked up. Even in yoga, there's the concept of karma.
Mm.
Like if you do good, you'll likely amplify and good things will come back to you. And the same with bad, the saying karma's a bitch,
Right.
right? And sin and all that. That seems like incarnations in society of, even in school, like doing the wrong thing, there's a punishment for it.
Right. Right. Well, and tell me if I'm understanding correctly. So, like with karma's a bitch. Shut your mouth. No. With with something like that, it's kind of planting the seed that act well towards your fellow people because it will come back to get you. Now, whether somebody has proof of that or not, or there's coincidence in the world or whatever, that's another story, right? But it's these seeds that are planted to act in certain ways, right? And with the karma's a bitch, maybe like in a pro-social way, as you had mentioned, right? Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I think going back to the identity versus behavior, um, shame makes us believe that we're unworthy of that love and belonging, right? Of like attachment with our parents or our tribe or connection, right? Um, and it ends up being the thing that we want to hide about ourselves from others, right? Um, Guilt is oftentimes, more out in the open, or we're more aware of the things that we are guilty, that we feel guilt over, right? Now we might project and do all kinds of protective or defense mechanisms against that. Um, Shame itself is just typically a blind spot until you really do an internal inventory.
Hmm. I was just thinking about like cavemen. Imagine you had like a caveman and a cave woman, like for thousands and thousands of years,
Hmm.
living outside, no showers, no toilet paper, no deodorant. You ain't plucking your eyebrows. You're super hairy. You smell it, right? There was no shame. Everybody was procreating and having babies and all of that. I mean, what a whole different world. You know what I mean? No
Yeah.
shame in smelling, no shame in, body hair. These are all cultural creations. Now we can experience shame if, oh, I get a little BO.
Right.
10,000 years ago, you just fit right in. No big
Well,
deal.
yeah, not to get anti-establishment, but like the goal then of this kind of shame created through society is, I better go spend money on deodorant, or
100%.
I better go spend money on body scaping razor or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
right?
This
Yeah.
is why there has to be a children's book called Everybody Poops, because nobody else can talk about that.
Yeah.
It's just like
Yeah.
kind of a shameful, somehow. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, well, right. It's like this idea. That's it's kind of funny. Like it's this idea that this behavior actually makes you part of the tribe. Like this is something that is shared, and it's that's a great segue into an area that I wasn't even necessarily thinking about, but um, how we all have shame, right? It's like the thing that makes us feel most alone and isolated because we believe that we're not worthy of connection, right? And it is one of the most common experiences as a human that lives in the world today, right? So it both feels isolating and is connecting, or has the potential to be connecting. But
So,
only if we choose to reach out and connect with our shame in healthy ways.
right. And so if you don't, if it's repressed shame, where does that lead? I'm thinking like perfectionism, maybe.
Mm. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think when shame is repressed, it leads to certainly perfectionism. I think when people, so like embarrassment is like a low, for in the way that I think about it, is like a low level shame, right? It's like, I wish that didn't happen to me in front of these people, or whatever.
Yep.
Um, but when we're not in touch with the things that, when we don't have a healthy relationship, and we're not aware of the things that bring us shame, typically, in addition to embarrassment, we very quickly might get angry, right? So for people that jump to anger really quickly without like um, being present in like the sadness of something, or the embarrassment of something, or the worry about, the worry about something, kind of those more vulnerable things, when people are jumping to anger more quickly, or blame or defensiveness, things like that, then yeah, I mean, that's certainly going to be a manifestation. But I think perfectionism is one of the things that it can lead to, this belief that um, unless I'm perfect, or this specific way, I'm not worthy, period. Right? So yeah, that's definitely one. And I think um, shame like also leads to inauthenticity, right? And we're going to do a whole episode or even series on authenticity, right? But with shame, um, like shame might keep me from being authentic with somebody if I believe that, in like saying what's true for me, or whatever, if I believe that they're going to abandon, or if they're going to maybe even get really angry, or if I might hurt their feelings or disappoint them in some way by being what's authentic to me. So shame might lead me to inauthenticity, and therefore starting to feel resentful of other people. Um, and essentially lying, I put it kind of in quotes, but like if I'm not authentic with somebody and not sharing what my truth is about how I feel about something, or what I want for dinner, or whatever, then some part of me is lying to them, right? Um, Another indicator of shame is sudden exhaustion. Like when people are hit with it, they might start to suddenly feel exhausted. And notice the pieces there, right? Jumping to anger, kind of you know, running away from who we actually are, and sudden exhaustion. That's fight, flight, and freeze right there, right? So shame puts us into a stress response.
Mhm. I like how you tied embarrassment as like a low level, like lower on the ladder, maybe a couple rungs lower than shame. Something that I experience in teaching yoga and Pilates, and something that I experienced when I started in my style of class, like in my studio, on the front of the room, and on one side are floor to ceiling mirrors. Like we
Mm,
practice with mirrors. So you're standing there. And when I first started, it took me months and months and months in hot yoga before I was comfortable enough to take my shirt off.
mm,
I'd wear like a t-shirt. I have a big scar on my stomach, right? As you know, I have Crohn's disease. I've been
hmm.
symptom free for a really long time because of my fitness and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but back in the day, in my 20s, I had a surgery and lost part of my intestines. So I had this big scar. And so I felt like embarrassment about that. And I witness in people who come for the first time, like if you're standing there, more so in yoga than in Pilates, because in yoga, like the lights are on normal, just like this lighting.
Mm,
But you're standing there and like looking at yourself in your workout gear with a mirror, that can be hard to do. I've
mm,
witnessed people, spending a long time being able to like lift their head up and like see themselves,
mm,
even as a silhouette in your periphery. That can be really challenging. I think
yeah.
we all have some level. I think it's maybe it's healthy. We all have some like low level of whatever that is. Maybe it's lower than embarrassment. I don't know what it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Yeah, like self-consciousness or something, or like being self-conscious. Is that maybe? I don't
Yeah,
know. Maybe
that's
that doesn't hit the
still,
spot. But yeah,
yeah. Hmm.
yeah.
So it doesn't seem like feeling shame or creating shame in another person would ever be beneficial. Is that true? Are there moments where it can be like a thing to use?
So I would say not creating shame in another person. I don't think that that's ever beneficial. Um, I think where shame has its place um, comes down. We're going to bring it back to childhood, right? Like this is here we go. Um, but the what? Okay, here's a way to think about it, and this might apply for guilt as well, right? Um, Shame and guilt, but when we're in our early childhood, um, we literally don't survive unless we have our caregivers' attention, right? We are, and I know I've said this before, but like of all mammals, when we're born, we are the least ready for the world, right? Giraffes are like standing up and walking in 15 seconds, right? Baby cows after like 2 minutes, right? They're walking around. Apes and chimps like immediately have the grip strength to hang on to their parents, right? Humans are the most helpless and vulnerable of all mammals when they're born, right? Dolphins are already swimming around, you know. So that being said, we we need a way to have our to maintain attachment, right? To maintain attachment. And we've done an episode on attachment styles, and it's necessary. Attachment is necessary for healthy development, and there's some part of a baby that knows it, right? And it's evolution. That's it. It's not some part of it. It's in its DNA.
Hmm.
Baby's DNA knows that attachment is how to survive,
It's
right?
the only way.
Only way.
Imagine going to the maternity ward and you look over at the nursery and there's all these newborn babies like walking around, like eating. They're being like, man, I'm so glad to be out of there. Imagine what a strange thing that would be. If, like giraffes, we were walking within 15 seconds, how strange that would be.
Yeah.
So we need that. It's a requirement to have that
Yeah,
connection, that attachment.
exactly. And so if as a young toddler or child, if we believe that our authentic self's presentation won't be accepted by our parents or caregivers in some way, and that so that could look like us expressing our anger authentically. It could be us seeking independence before our little bits of independence before our parents are ready to uh, let us experiment with that. It could even be like if our parents are resentful people, even an authentic expression of joy could be triggering for the caregivers, right? And so, yeah, the list goes on and on. So guilt or shame is the internal mechanism that kicks in to maintain these relationships, right? And it shifts who we authentically were meant to be or are. We shut down that part of ourselves so that we can survive, right? But it also then sticks around as a protective mechanism. It did protect us in those moments early on, but because it is occurring during the time where our nervous system and brain are just rapidly developing deep pathways, right? Um, it is a part of our bodies and our subconscious's memory. So it guides our behavior. Our bodies are what enact our behavior, right? And the feelings in our bodies. Um,
Can I ask you? Can I interrupt?
yeah, yeah.
So it's because we're, family oriented, we're pack animals.
Hmm.
And it made me think of my puppy Chili. So I just want to make sure that I understand this right. And I bet this might resonate with people. If this resonates with you guys, comment below. Make sure to like this video. So let's just say hypothetically, when I'm not home, Chili rips up a cushion and there's stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
The moment I walk in the door, he's in the corner, like looking at me. Like he knows he did something wrong. I didn't say anything. So I'm thinking that's guilt. If I were to then say, which I would never do, bad dog, right?
Yeah.
That would be then shame. But is it hardwired in him to feel like he knew he did something wrong? Because he's a pack creature, he's a family creature, and has to have that attachment to survive.
I love your question and differentiation there. So I'm going to borrow from something that Gabor Mate, who's a really wonderful speaker on this and many topics, that I heard him talk about. So you had said that guilt is maybe he knows he did something wrong, right? I would agree with maybe he feels that he did something wrong, right? But is it wrong for a baby to throw their food on the ground, or even a 1.5-year-old or whatever, or is it just an impulsive, I'm making connections and seeing how the world works, right? Like when I drop this, what happens? Oh, gravity. Also, what do you do? Right? So it's almost this for creatures, including, young children that don't have as developed frontal lobes of their brain to regulate impulse and, have inhibition and make connections between current actions and later consequences or results of those actions. Is it actually wrong for them to just be who they are in that moment, or is it wrong, or does he experience guilt or whatever because does Chili experience guilt because of worry about how you're going to feel about it or about disconnection in the moment that you walk in the door?
Yep.
Right?
Before I walked in the door, he's having a great time.
Right. And even I mean dogs and children are incredibly attuned to our nonverbal communication, our facial expression, our tone, right? And so if we look anything but happy when we find that torn up pillow, that is a risk to their attachment with us. Or it feels like it, even if we respond of oh, what the heck? Okay, buddy, you can't do that. All right, I'm going to clean this up. Right? That exasperation even, right? He doesn't know I'm going to clean this up. He doesn't know that language, right? And so he just senses your exasperation with what he did.
That's it for today, you guys. Make sure to follow us. You can find us on all the major platforms. If you really like what you heard, maybe share it with a friend, share it with a buddy, maybe share it with an enemy, because we all need a little bit of love. We're going to level up together. See you next time.